Hi there, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this edition of Global Insight on For You Media Africa. We're here again now to talk what is topical around the globe, particularly looking at the crisis between the Russian Federation and the government of Ukraine, looking at, of course, the contested area of the Donbas, and bringing to the fore the position of the media in bringing resolve to the ongoing flare as the Russia-Ukraine war continues to gain momentum. The media has taken a particular focus on reporting on the real stakes by embarking on a field trip journey to leave the realities on the ground to provide an alternative information to what is coming from mainstream media, particularly a delegation of foreign journalists and also including experts and human rights lawyer covering countries like Germany, the United States of America, Italy, Turkey, Cameroon, among others, recently visited the Donetsk People's Republic, DPR. And of course, during this press tour, the media men and women visited strategic areas of the country, of the area, especially the Azovstal steel plants are actually affected by the shelling in Donetsk and Mariupol and elsewhere in the region. The journalists also met with the ruler of the Donetsk People's Republic, Denis Pushilin, at a press conference, a meeting that provided them with the scope for question and answers on current stakes pertaining the crisis in the Donbas and particularly in the Donetsk People's Republic. The press tour, which happened from the September 27 to the 8th of October 2024, was made possible by the Information and Press Department of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Russian Federation, among other stakeholders that ensured utmost security for journalists to gather first-hand information and bring about the real narratives happening in the Donbas, and of course with a panel of experts, and particularly a team that was part of this press tour. We want to analyze the role of the media in solving the crisis pertaining the Russian Federation and the government of Ukraine. What is the possibility of the media playing a greater role in all of this? And of course, we are going to analyze this in the course of the program, a discursive and informative program, ladies and gentlemen. It is Global Insight, and of course, without much ado, let's get to the United States of America, welcoming Daniel KOVALIK, who is KOVALIK, lawyer, human rights scholar, and peace advocate. Welcome to you, Daniel. And of course, we appreciate your time to bring more insight on this topic that focuses on the role of the media in bringing resolve to the ongoing crisis or Ukrainian crisis. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Clarice.
And of course, we are going straight away to getting, a holistic analysis from you, Dan, regarding what you witnessed on the field this time around, noting that it wasn't the first time you're visiting the Donetsk People's Republic and elsewhere in the Donbas areas that are actually, being suffering from the shellings, of course, that intensified even after we saw the special military operation and then the engagement also of the third-party countries in the whole situation. What holistic approach can you give pertaining this recent visit to the Donetsk People's Republic?
Yes, well, this was my 5th time to the Donbass, my 3rd time to Donetsk in the last 2 years. And first of all, I saw a lot of improvements for the people there in Donetsk and Mariupol, huge amounts of reconstruction, particularly in Mariupol. The Russians have put in, I think, $5 billion in doing massive reconstruction and new construction housing, hospitals, schools. It's quite impressive. And so I think there's been a lot of gains in those regions in terms of, first of all, security and peace in the last 2 years, and also in terms of, again, infrastructure improvements, which have been massive. And we have to remind our audience that this war did not start in 2022. It started in 2014.
Yeah.
When, first of all, there was a right-wing coup that was supported by the United States, instigated by the United States. And it brought to power a government that was openly hostile towards its own Russian-speaking population, particularly in the East, particularly in the Donbass. This led the two republics, Donetsk People's Republic and Lugansk People's Republic, to be formed and to have referenda in which they declared national sovereignty. They declared independence from Ukraine. This began a war between Kiev and those two republics, in which 14,000 people were killed, even before Russia intervened in February of 2022. So I just wanted to give that caveat.
Looking at, of course, the historical phase of it as to when this crisis actually started, Dan, do you how do you think such missions which have been undertaken by particularly private media, and in our preamble we highlighted the media
aggression, it ignores the war that was going on between 2014 and 2022. It either downplays or totally denies the fact of Nazis, neo-Nazis involved in the conflict on the side of Kiev. And again, so it's very important to get independent journalists into these zones on the truth. And the fact this war has been going on a long time, the fact that most of the people in the Donbass, frankly, are happy the Russians intervene and they're happy the Russians are there. The other, thing you observe, by the way, and again, that the Western press either won't say or just lies about, the Western press says, oh, well, these are occupied areas in Mariupol and Donetsk. They're occupied by Russia. Well, there's no evidence it's occupied. Clarice, we saw very few Russian soldiers on our trip there. There were a few checkpoints, but those were between cities, not within cities. The border is pretty porous between mainland Russia and Donbass. There's barely even, a kind of customs immigration there anymore. So, there is no evidence of an occupation, also there's very little evidence of a partisan movement against the Russians, right? You don't see massive, operations of people forming militias to oppose the Russians or whatever. The people are glad the Russians are there. And that is an inconvenient fact to the whole Western narrative. And again, trips like ours are able to report on those facts.
Lapses of or politics of international relations and some sort of conspiracy that happens at the upper level, that a group of individuals who always mastermind not to benefit the population but rather for their personal interest and not to save actually humanity. What new perspectives, Dan, do you think can the private media bring into the conflicts of, digging deep into understanding the philosophy behind the collective West and the involvement in war across the world, particularly in the Donbass region?
Well, I mean, you can start by the fact that you have these private companies, BlackRock and Vanguard, which now own about 30% of the land concessions in Ukraine. And these are American companies, by the way. And it's very clear that the war, in large part, from the Western perspective is to protect those interests, those investments, and also investments in minerals, the very rich mineral resources of Ukraine, particularly East Ukraine. In fact, Senator Lindsey Graham, Republican senator from the United States, recently said that the U.S. was supporting this war in order to be able to control those mineral resources in Ukraine.
Yeah, sure.
And again, the U.S. itself probably won't control them. They'll be controlled by these private investment firms. So as we see many times, these wars are wars about capital and profits, not about human rights or democracy or freedom or any of those things that we're told by the West.
Still on another very important aspect, let's look at the series of talks which have been holding. Let's take the particular case of the talks in Belarus, and also the talks maybe hosted by Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, still on resolving these bilateral agreements, which today we are talking about Ukrainian war between the Russian Federation and the Ukraine government. When you look at the stakes on the ground, Daniel, how can we use this to give importance to these talks and see if today these talks still have relevance in the process of trying to bring a resolve to maybe a permanent solution to the crisis?
Honestly, I don't think so, and I'll tell you why. Because in the end, first of all, you don't have a sitting president in Kiev. Zelensky's presidential term ran out months ago, and he's refused to call for new elections. So first of all, who has the authority on Ukraine's side to negotiate anything? No one. And of course, why is that? Because it's the U.S. that pulls the strings in Ukraine anyway. There's no deal that's going to be reached unless the U.S. is involved in it. It's going to be a deal between the U.S. and Russia. That's just a fact. And I don't think that deal is possible under the Biden administration. I certainly don't think it's possible before the November 5th elections. There was, we have to be reminded, a possibility of a peace deal back in March of 2022. A deal appeared to be, at least a framework of a deal was reached between Ukraine and Russia, in which Ukraine could have kept all the territory it lost after February 2022, and the U.S. and United Kingdom intervened to kill that deal. And I think that was the last time probably negotiations between Ukraine and Russia were really, could have resulted in a peace deal. And it also shows, again, who's in charge here. It's not Kiev. It's Washington, and to a lesser extent, London.
In charge, being the problematic or the main question that we've been trying to answer, and that's one of the reasons, or maybe one of the reasons that led to this press tour, which actually brought the journalists to the realization of the situation on the ground. And looking at it from another perspective, still with you, Dan, let's look at who is in charge here and see how, other countries, because lately we've been seeing statements from countries like Germany and elsewhere in Europe saying that they will not send military assistance to the Zelensky-led government in Kyiv. Can we, to an extent, say it's because they have understood, the philosophy about the fact that the collective West, or even other countries which you just mentioned, like the United States and UK, have been, supporting the Kyiv government for some personal interest, maybe geopolitical interest? I would like like to revisit what the EU officials said some time ago, that the USA is not backing Ukraine because they actually love Ukrainians, or they want to actually see Ukraine emerging as the victor in this whole scenario. It's because they are actually pursuing their geopolitical interest. And it brings us now to the standpoint of some countries right now, Germany, others, Poland, decrying the fact that this is causing them more harm than good, and relooking into, sending more military aid to Ukraine. What can we, bring as the understanding of this whole complexity of the situation, and what is the way forward for countries that are backing the Kyiv government?
Yeah, well, I think Europeans are waking up to the fact that they are some of the losers in this conflict, right? That this was one of the things the U.S. wanted out of this conflict, was to cut Europe off from Russian natural gas, and Europe has been depending on Russian natural gas for many decades, even when Russia was the Soviet Union. And this has devastated the European economy, that they've been cut off from this cheap fuel.
Who are feeling the brunt of the shellings or the crisis, and of course for this number of years, there have always been reports that people are being forced into, being witnesses, supporting particularly the Russian Federation, whereas they are not happy with the whole situation on the ground, and particularly with the involvement of Russia. While on the field, did you see a contrary idea to this when you interacted with the residents there in the Donetsk People's Republic?
Yeah, I mean, my impression is that people feel glad that Russia's intervened. They're glad they're now part of Russia. They voted in referenda in September 2022 to become part of the Russian Federation. They feel that they now have hope for the future because of that their hope does lie with Russia, not with Ukraine. And in fact, real estate prices went way up after they joined Russia, which shows, it's a real indicator of where people are at, that they think that their country is better off, and their real estate, their land is more valuable now being part of Russia than being part of Ukraine. It says a lot. When you're in Donetsk, the city of Donetsk, you look around at what was destroyed in the 2014-2015 war between Kiev and that region. They had an airport that's completely destroyed. The government in Kiev destroyed that. The military destroyed that. They have a world-class, football stadium, one of the best in the world, that was recently built before this conflict began in 2014. But they don't have an airport to support people coming into the country to use it. They're worse off now because of the conflict that began in 2014, but they're better off since Russia came in. They're safer, and again, they have the opportunity for their infrastructure to be rebuilt. Hopefully that the Russians will rebuild that airport in Donetsk, and Donetsk will be, a destination point again, not only for Russians, but for Europeans. And that was lost in 2014. And I think, again, the Russians are the hope that that will be restored.
Indeed. And on the aspects of censorship and manipulation in the age of misinformation, General KOVALIK, how do you think, as a pundit and very concerned with the happenings, geopolitical happenings across the globe, and particularly on what is happening between Russia and Ukraine, how can journalists ensure that they present these accurate and comprehensive reports which reflect reflect the realities of life in the Donbass without being tagged as propagandists or maybe targeted and maybe deprived from, the exercising or maybe dispensing fully their job?
Well, we're going to be called propagandists, and we're going to be subject to some kinds of censorship no matter what we do or say. That's just a fact. Because we are challenging the mainstream narrative. And, that makes us a target. But I think the key is, first of all, you go to those regions, you talk to people on the ground, and you report on it. And you report on it honestly. If you do that, you're not going to insulate yourself from those attacks, from that slander, but, I think people will see through those attacks and they will listen to what you have to say. And I think, I'll tell you, I think that a work of independent journalists has worked in the United States, and I'll tell you why, because polls show very few Americans see Russia as a threat. Very low numbers there. As hard as the U.S. government and media push to represent Russia as a threat, by and large, Americans aren't buying it. And they're not buying it because there have been independent journalists who have told the truth and have pushed against that narrative. And that's a victory. And that's why the U.S. government now is going after RT News and other outlets. Sputnik, for example, Sputnik Radio was just recently shut down by the Treasury Department of the United States. Yeah, they're going after independent journalists.
Okay.
Because they know they've lost the info wars, and I'm proud of being a part of the victory we've had over the Western narrative.
Okay. Thank you so much, Daniel KOVALIK, a lawyer, human rights scholar, and peace advocate, for your insight on this particular topic, the media in face of Ukraine crisis. And of course, this topic is coming as a result of a press tour that a group of journalists coming from Turkey, Germany, United States of America, Italy, Cameroon, and elsewhere visited the disputed area, the Donbass to be precise, to relate with the residents, and of course to actually see for themselves the happenings which have been occurring, especially since from the time of 2014 to the start of the special military operation till date. And we met a lot of other journalists that are based in the Donbass and have been given the real stakes on the ground. People like Patrick Lancaster. We have CHRISTELLE NÉAT from France, who has taken this assignment to be on the ground and report news as it happens, in spite of the censorship, in spite of being attacked as propagandists, and of course in the transformation of news or information pertaining the crisis. Just been informed that KIVANÇ ÖZDAL has joined us. He's coming from ULUSAL KANAL, foreign news chief. This is a news outlet in Turkey. Welcome to Global Insight this day, ÖZDAL.
Hi, Clarice. Thank you so much. I am happy to be here.
We're happy to have you too, and of course on the Pan-African television, it is for you, Media Africa. Although you were part of the journalists that embarked on the media tour to continue to appraise the situation on the ground pertaining the Russian-Ukraine crisis, particularly in the Donetsk People's Republic. We want to have, your impression or insight after visiting this region, from the period of September 27 to the 8th of October. What can you say are those changes which have occurred ever since you started visiting the area in crisis?
Yes, as you say, it wasn't a short trip. Actually, we were there for 4 days, yeah. And we had chance to see the situation in Donetsk Republic, and not just Donetsk, because we travel with a bus from the Moscow to Donetsk, and when we turned back, we had chance to see little bit Lugansk Republic also. Okay, we didn't did interview with the people in Lugansk, but at least we had chance to see the atmosphere in Lugansk also. And we talk a lot with not just Donetsk people, but also the Russian people in Moscow also, because now actually Russia is in war with collective West. So to see the Donetsk was good for us, but in the same time, it was really helpful to talk with Russian people who live in Moscow. So when we went there, it was like the anniversary of the reunification. So the Donetsk and Lugansk republics just they joined to Russia Federation, and it was the anniversary of this date when we went there. And in Donetsk, we saw how the reunification helped to Donetsk people. First, security, like in term of security, and the second, in the term of reinfrastructure, like because before of reunification, the Ukrainian Nazis attacked the years and years to Donetsk, Lugansk, and after the reunification, the Donetsk people started to feel themselves safe, because before reunification, it was just Donetsk militia, Donetsk soldiers who fight with Ukrainian army, the Nazis. But after the reunification, because of the Donetsk, it's part of Russia, the Russian army started to fight with Ukrainian Nazis, and the situations turned reverse because of the power of Russia.
Okay.
So we talk with Donetsk people, the Donetsk citizens, and they told us as like they were waiting for Russian army, because yes, they resist, but it wasn't easy to resist for them to Ukrainian Nazis. But after the reunification, actually Russian army entered to Donetsk, and after now, today also, the Russian army captured 3 cities of Donetsk from Nazis. So this is really important. And the second, as I told you, the situation of the cities.
Yeah.
When we visit the Donetsk cities, like we saw the nature of the war, the destruction of the war, how the war is destructive. Like we witnesses. The buildings they destruct. We saw the buildings destructed, the neighborhood destructed. But in the same time, we saw the new buildings, the constructions, the constructions of infrastructure. So, like when we talk now, you are giving the chief of Donetsk, Pushilin, and Mr. Pushilin also. He was saying to us, we did an interview with Mr. Pushilin, and the chief of the Donetsk Public Republic.
Yeah.
He told us also the same thing. Like he said us, like after reunification, Russia started to care with Donetsk cities, and before this, like the Ukrainian government saw Donetsk as a separatist region, and actually they didn't do anything for Donetsk people, Donetsk citizens. So after the reunifications, now in Donetsk, in Lugansk, in Mariupol, we visit Mariupol also, the seaside of Donetsk. Now we see there is a big effort to make the cities alive again.
Absolutely, giving a new phase to the city of Mariupol. When I listened keenly to you, Osdal, I want to, have this viewpoint from you. You're coming from Turkey, and we're also aware of the role that Turkey plays in trying to mediate the ongoing crisis in Ukraine. Let's look at what you witnessed on the field as a journalist. Do you think it was enough for the Russian Federation to have entered to kickstart the special military operation? This question is particularly because some people are of the viewpoint that what was happening did not give Russia enough reasons to have started off with the special military operation in 2022. Do you share that same perspective, or the realities on the field actually gave you the assertion that it was a necessary step from the Russian Federation?
Thank you for this question. As you know, Turkey is a member of NATO.
Sure.
So, but we are not in the same time with the same position with US or Germany, because in our group, as you know really well, the German journalists, the US journalists participate to our trip. And Turkey is a country of NATO who doesn't follow. It's a country who doesn't follow the sanction against Russia. First thing, we are a member of NATO, but we don't follow the sanctions against Russia. But in the same time, Turkey has good relation with Russia. But in the same time, the Turkish companies sell the drones and armored vehicles to Ukrainian government also. So the government of Turkey, AK Party, try to be good with Ukraine and with Russia in the same time. And actually is a dilemma. And Turkish media, we can say, is kind of a Western media. Okay, as ULUSAL KANAL, the news channel I work, and Aydınlık newspaper, our newspaper of the group, we try to give the truth about Ukrainian war, the special operation of Russia.
Yeah.
But generally, in Turkey, the Turkish people, they are under attack of Western lies. So it was really good for us to go to Donetsk and to see the truth from there, because we talk with Donetskian people, and in Turkey generally the Western media, the Western lies say the Russia, they are attacking to Ukrainian territories. But when we went there, we saw actually the Donetskian people who fight against Ukraine the years and years, and after years and years, just they were waiting for the Russian army came here and they solved them. And the real thing is this, and we are witnesses of this because we were talking with Donetskian people. And it's not difficult to explain this situation to Turkish people. Why? Because we live the same thing in 74 in Cyprus. In Cyprus, the Greeks were attacking to Turkish citizens, and during years and years, the Turkish citizens' identity. Just they were waiting, the Turkish army came and they helped them. So in 74, the Turkish army entered to the Cyprus and they help to the Turkish civilian.
Sure.
To explain the situation in Ukraine now, not Ukraine, Donetsk, Lugansk, is really useful for us to use this argument. Actually, sometimes there are other civilians who need help, and a country, an army can go there to help them. In our channel, we try to explain the situation in Donetsk and Lugansk like this to Turkish audience.
Which is very imperative to have an alternative source of information that characterizes the situation in the Donbass and in the face of heightened geopolitical competition, and how countries are carving new spheres of interest in the world of today, and of course redefining the prospects or the lines of international relations and corporations. Just to note, ladies and gentlemen, if you are just tuning in, you're on to For You Media Africa, and you are watching the program Global Insider, discursive and knowledge sharing program. And this time we are still talking to ÖZDAL from Turkey, a journalist who actually went through the thick and thin to visit the Donbass. And of course, let's look at the encounter with the military, especially volunteers fighting for the Russian Federation, which we actually visited their maybe training ground. Here we're looking at the CHRISTELLE group of military, and one thing they said which was very peculiar was that they are volunteers and they are fighting independently, like not directly involved under the Russian Ministry of Defense. And from the narratives they gave, some said they were being cajoled into the crisis, like sent to the war front when they were actually recruited into the Ukrainian army without their consent. And when they realized the real stakes on the ground, they had to switch because there was a need to protect motherland. So what can you say about this experience with these volunteers of the military, which have defected and now defending the Russian Federation in the fight for this unified state that many of them voice during their interaction with the media in the Donetsk People's Republic? ÖZDAL?
So actually we visit two volunteers group, not just one. As you say, the first volunteers groups we visit, it was Ukrainians volunteers. But there is a second volunteers groups also. It's Ahmat groups is really famous in Turkey, and actually in Turkey we know them as the Chechens, but when we went there we saw they are not just Chechens, they are volunteers from Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, Azerbaijan, Dagestan, and all of Russia. So first part, the Ukrainian volunteers, we talk with them, so they try to liberate their country, the Ukraine, from the Nazis, from the Zelensky regime. So to understand the situation, maybe we need to think the Second World War, because in the Second World War also it was the same situation. The people try to defeat the Nazis, the fascism, from their countries. So as now you show the picture, at the first place we visited, the Ukrainian volunteers, they try to liberate their country from Zelensky regime and the Nazis of Europe. And for this, they feel they need to fight. They feel to do something for their country. So now they passed to the Russian part, and with Russians, they are fighting against Zelensky and Nazis. This is important because these people, they are still Ukrainian. They told us like they are not fighting against Ukraine.
Yeah.
They told us they are fighting against the Zelensky regime and Nazis who actually who get power in their own country. This is an important point. As I told you, like to understand this, maybe we have to think about the Second World War, because in Europe they lived the same thing in the past. And about the second part, like the Ahmad,
Yes,
Ahmad group,
yeah.
Ahmad Battalion. As a Turkish journalist, we really wanted to go there because Turkish population, they are Muslims and they have relations with Middle Asia. So, as I told you, like Kadyrov and this Ahmad Battalion, it's really famous in Turkey, actually in social media. And when we went there, actually we surprised. Because in our mind we were thinking we will meet with Chechen warriors. But when we were there, we understood it's not just Chechen warriors. These volunteers, they are from all the Asia, like from Dagestan, from Kyrgyzstan, from Uzbekistan, from Russia, sure, from Russia.
Yeah.
So the Chechen battalion also, we can't say it's a just Chechen battalion. It takes the name Ahmad from the father of Kadyrov, and we call them Chechen because of this. But otherwise, is a volunteer group, volunteer battalion from all the Asia, and these people, their fight for their motherland.
Indeed. Indeed, fighting for the motherland, which were the words reverberated by many of those volunteers. One last question to you before we welcome Yulia, ÖZDAL. When we look at the situation and of course this media tour, there's already been a reaction from the government of Kyiv pertaining the involvement of particularly Turkish journalists in the situation in the Donbass. How can we actually maybe bring about a balance rather than, do you think the Ukrainian government can actually open its doors to welcome probably journalists from Turkey with your own perspective to try to get the information from the Ukrainian side in order to bring a balance without endangering the lives of the journalists in question?
There are a lot of journalists who went to Ukraine really safely. They didn't have any problem. The Zelensky regime told them welcome, because they were at the NATO side. In Turkey, we are living a information war between NATO and Eurasian force. So when a journalist who is side of West, and when they visit Ukraine, there is no problem for Ukrainian government. But when ULUSAL KANAL and Aydınlık newspaper, we went to Donetsk to see the truth and to make the news, to make the informations, the Ukrainian government start to attack us, and it's something really understandable, because as I told you, Turkey is between East and West, and the war between the NATO, the Atlantic and Eurasian forces continue in Turkey, and Ukraine, Zelensky regime also is a part of this war.
Okay, thank you so much, ÖZDAL. And time for us to welcome Yulia Berg, political scientist and founder Globus Expert Club, joining from Moscow to the program Global Insiders Day, which focus on the media in face of the Ukraine crisis, particularly looking at the press tour where a group of journalists from across the world visited the Donbass to get the 2024 stakes, which we underlined already that the mission started from the 27th to the 8th of October, 27th of September to the 8th of October 2024, taking the real stakes on the ground. And from what has been narrated so far by Dan KOVALIK and ÖZDAL Yulia, I will bring us now to the aspect of the role of political agenda in all what is happening and how this actually undermines the press or the media in the dispensation of the role of being the public watchdog, or even bringing out the information as news as it happens to the general public on this very important aspect of the crisis between the Russian Federation and the Kiev government.
Yes, hello Clarice, and I'm happy to join the program today, and I'm happy to greet the audience watching us on this day. I think the topic we're discussing is very important, and I would like to start off answering your question with the words of admiration and gratitude towards the ones that choose to come and risk their lives and see for themselves and report on the actual situation on the ground in Donbass. Donetsk is still being shelled. Many other places are still being shelled. They're still in a great danger. And the first thing I would like to say is that it does require a lot of courage, because the risks posed to the lives of those foreigners coming are not always the life-threatening in terms of the risks of being physically wounded, but also in terms of the pressure that they might be getting when they go back, especially to the countries of the European Union, to the United States. So it does require a lot of courage, and Christelle, who's present here today, is a beautiful example of the real courage, the real passion for the profession. And yes, absolutely, it's absolutely so, because there are just a few of those who have been there for a while, and they know the situation from the inside, and they're able to provide a very a very comprehensive vision of what's happening. So in the first place, it's important to say that, we've been involved in making sure that this kind of visits of foreign experts and journalists are possible, starting from 2022. So after the beginning of the special military operation, before the new regions have rejoined Russia. The situation on the ground was way too dangerous for such things to be happening, but the Ministry of Defense was still trying to make sure that there are some groups coming in. Yet after the referendum and after the regions have become a part of Russia, including the DPR, the regulations have changed, even though it's still important to understand that we're talking about a war zone, and a war zone has its own rules. Security regulations always come first, but it's still a very important fact that people keep going there. And I'm happy to say that starting from 2022, some of the experts and members or participants of the project of the Globus Expert Club have been frequent there. And they're able to compare the situation, compare the overall atmosphere, compare the security situation, and see the dynamics of what's happening in Donbass, what was happening there back in 2022, and how the cities like Mariupol look like now. I think it's very important to provide this kind of opportunities. So such organizations as the GLOBUS Expert Club, as the Public Movement Donetsk People Republic, Resurrection Foundation, some of the members of the State Parliament of Russia, and many others have been organizing opportunities for journalists to come and humanitarian missions and many other things. And I think it's essential for being able to know the truth and to disseminate it. Given the fact that there is quite a lot of fake news circulating, especially in 2022, we could observe various kinds of fake news campaigns that were clearly orchestrated. And being a political scientist, I can tell that any specialist in media, in campaigning and in marketing, can tell when something is orchestrated, when something has big budgets behind, and those kind of things, because when you see the design, the graphic, the immediate appearance, like almost on the same minute of the news on various kinds of sources, you can surely know that it was worked on before, and it's a coordinated commercial activity, no more, no less than that. Absolutely. When we talk about the media that is trying to get the grassroots data, the conversations with the people on the ground, you can see even by the way those materials are done that they're natural, they're not always perfectly, let's say, edited, because it's real life, because you don't have time to, or you don't have opportunity to, to make sure that it's all set perfectly well with the light and everything else. So, I mean, even by the type of content, you can tell in many cases, or by analyzing how it appears, you can tell where it comes from. And there is nothing that can replace those vivid reports, those vivid conversations with the people on the ground. Okay. And it's very important that there is still a growing interest to go into Donetsk, growing interest in trying to cover the situation from different angles. And even though some of those people traveling there are not even able to have their names mentioned, they're still doing a great job, and they're still, I think, providing a great contribution in explaining to their audiences the other side of the story, explaining, what has been happening and why, and some of the reasoning that definitely will never be shown on channels like BBC or CNN or somewhere else. Okay.
It's about giving the other side of the story. And we continue with you, CHRISTELLE, NÉAT, Editor-in-Chief or Deputy Editor-in-Chief, International Reporters, and still looking at this role of political agenda. And you have been involved in the news reporting on the war zone for quite a long time, and living the realities and having to live actually what the population of the Donbas has been living all these years. So as a journalist and practicing in a very complex situation and a contested area like the Donbas, do you think there is, at one point there is room for, how a political affiliation and agenda of various media outlets which are impacting the media coverage of the whole situation, and how this brings about, a compromise of the journalistic integrity, or maybe practice of in the area of news giving, particularly on areas which are very critical, like the crisis in the Donbas, which we are having on the table this day?
Thank you, Clarence. Yeah, of course, we see there is a political agenda behind the news, especially in the news from the West. We clearly see there is a narrative set, and the Western journalists are sticking to it. If they do not stick to it, they lose their jobs. So it's very simple, and it's very obvious. And what is funny is that these journalists pretend that they are neutral, that they are factual, and so on, and it's not the case. But I think there's of course a place for, I don't believe in the neutrality of the journalist. A journalist is a person, and of course each person has its own opinions, political opinion, way of viewing life, and so on. So of course a journalist cannot be purely neutral because it's not a robot. But a journalist has to be factual. And that's where we have now a problem with the Western media, is that they let all these political biases dictate what they publish. So they publish things which has nothing to do with facts. And that's the main problem. As I always told them when I met some of them here, because some of them came to Donbass and I've seen what they published. And I say, you can consider that you are for Kiev. You can be on the Ukrainian side and think that Ukraine is right, but you have to report facts, not your opinions. You can express your opinions, but first you have to share facts with your audience. That's what you are paid for. You are a journalist. You're here to share information about the events, about what is happening. Not transforming things and present your opinion as facts. And that's the main problem that we have now with the Western press. Sure. All the Western media, they transform the political agenda into news, and sometimes going completely contrary to the facts. So I think there's a possibility, there's a big open room. A lot of journalists who came to Donbass and did a very great job were not for Donbass or for Russia. A lot of them were really neutral, or some of them even thought that Ukraine was right, but some of them did the job more or less properly. So they shared the fact about what they saw, what they have witnessed. And so I think we should review international standards like the Munich Charter to take this into account. I mean, a journalist cannot be neutral, but he should be factual. So he should share the facts. And after, if his opinion is that despite all this, okay, Ukraine is right, it's okay. It's your opinion. You have the right to have your opinion.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I think, and that's the main problem we have now. Which means we have a lot of people who support Russia and Donbass who come to make the job and make the job greatly. But I think there's also a place for people who are either neutral or even perhaps considering that Ukraine is right, but who are also factual and who are able to, let's say, discriminate between their opinion and their work of journalists.
Absolutely. This trying to bring, maybe the differences between opinion and facts in the process of news giving. I will stay with you, Christelle. You're a journalist from France, and of course, you're very much aware of France's stance as far as the Ukraine crisis is concerned. What actually is the motivation that to date you are still in the Donbass? Relating information as it happens, in spite of all the complexities of the crisis, which has largely been seen to be more of a geopolitical rather than a contestation between the two countries.
What gives me the most support in my work is the feedback from my readers. The feedback from people who watch my videos, who read my articles. I am in constant contact with them, so through the various channels they can comment on all the social media, and If they have a real question, I answer. Now we even have direct, like we have now with you, but directly with them. So once a week they can ask questions both about the news, but also about how we work, about some, say, personal stuff, and it built a very strong relationship. And so regularly when I have compliments, when I have people who tell me how it's important, the work that I'm doing, sometimes people tell me that I open their eyes about what is really happening, that the work that I'm doing is important, and so on. You know, when sometimes I have the feeling that okay, it's really too hard, and so on, and you are a bit depressed. You have sometimes some moments where you feel that the price to pay is really high. Absolutely. But you receive so much love from the readers, so much support that it gives strength to continue. So for me, the best, let's say, remedy to all these difficulties and to all these you know, depressive aspects of doing this work in such conditions where your native country is against you, is in fact supporting, financing, and giving weapons to the country who would like to kill you, because I have to remember that Ukraine is killing journalists since 2014, has killed already 30 Russian journalists, and is wishing to kill more. So that's really something hard. You know, you have moments where you feel a bit despaired, and I have always a reader who, like, you know, it happens really by chance that he comes and tells me, "Christelle, thank you very much for your work. It's really important. You're a great woman, and what you do is so great, and you open my eyes." And it gives back all this strength to continue. So that's I think the feedback with our readers for real journalists, for people. Okay. Who are wishing to share the truth despite the difficulties. I think the contact with the readers, with your public, with your audience is really important, because people are really great at supporting you, and you know, valuing the importance of the work we are doing.
Okay, thank you so much, Christelle. And that is the plight of a journalist on the field, particularly taking interest on sensitive issues. And Yulia Berg actually pinpointed that during her first interaction or intervention, which she said it takes courage, because there is a lot to lose when you take that milestone or that bold step to get to the ground and get, of course, what is factual. And this brings us again to look at the role of the international community. With you, dear Yulia, let's look at how important it is for the international community, and we particularize here with the bodies that actually protect the rights of journalists in the dispensation of their work. What do you think are those new dimensions that we need to bring into the practice of journalism, especially on journalists who are covering you know, information in war zones, so as to make them, you know, have rights to their, you know, the right to you know, bring news to the fore without the fear of being isolated, fear of being targeted, or fear of being entangled in some sort of, you know, political contestations happening among political maybe superpowers across the world.
Well, another important point that I think is worth making here and now is that some of that work being done by journalists and experts in international law, experts in conflicts, it also serves the purpose of being used at the major international venues. And Dan KOVALIK, who was present in this program at the very beginning, he was one of those persons that traveled to Donbass back in November 2022 for the first time. Yeah. Also to take a look at the evidence of the fact that US made weapons and EU made weapons were being used to shell the civilians. And he spoke at the UN Security Council. We also had a very vivid example of the case of one of the monasteries in DPR, located right at the front line, being constantly shelled by Ukrainian army. That was discussed at the UN Security Council. And after that, more attention was drawn to this fact. More of humanitarian aid was making it through to the monastery. I think a lot of it has to do with the not just, let's say, the media attention, but also the fact that the expert community at such a level as the UN was getting this information, and the awareness about this kind of, striking facts was brought about. So I think another important aspect, aside for just raising awareness among the people and the let's say audience, is that a more of timely analysis can be done, because as we say in Russian, you don't show your fists after the fight is over. It does make sense, right? So it's important to be there when it's happening, to be able to record the fresh, let's say, videos, impressions, gather evidence. And in DPR, there are quite a lot of museums and quite a lot of exhibitions that are aimed at showing the evidence of what was found during the conflict time, right? And this goes to show the kinds of weapons that were used against civilians. Some of the evidence that is showing certain symbols being used by Ukrainian battalions that definitely show their ideology as a quite destructive one, and this kind of Nazi ideology that is prohibited in many countries. Yeah. And quite a lot of things that are important to see specifically when it's happening, because otherwise it can all be about various kinds of interpretations. And if we're talking about hard facts, it's important to document them. Yeah. And at the moment, the process that was in a specific way taken care of by the OSCE mission, it's not happening anymore. But the OSCE was a bit tricky in the way they presented the facts. In many cases, they would just say that there was shelling of civilian population, but they wouldn't indicate where the shells were coming from and who was to be held responsible for this. Okay. Because, well, every war would be over sooner or later, and after it would be important to go through the facts and to deal with the consequences of the decisions made by certain people, including the military commanders that were allowing such cruelty to happen against civilians, and striking examples of Mariupol, striking examples of humanitarian corridors being sabotaged, people being shot, including pregnant women, including many civilians that were just trying to escape from the war.
And which brings us to understanding something that is very peculiar in the way the media is actually working today. Yulia, let me stay with you. While you were talking, and of course with what Christelle highlighted, we want to look at the fact how we can, have a compromise, or maybe that point of collaboration where maybe the two versions will come to meet for us to bring about that a turning point, especially on the crisis in the Donbass. People have always argued that, of course, these journalists that have been visiting the Donbass, particularly on the side of Russia, are spreading Russian propaganda, and they obviously say that we are on a program like this without a counter opinion. And that is something which is very imperative. Do you think, or have you noticed a counter opinion coming from the mainstream media to get, you know, the alternative analysis on the realities of the Donbass, and how can we strike this balance so as to ensure that the media that is supposed to be that instrument that will, you know, build the world, we don't use it instead to bring further this suppression in the way we give out information, especially sensitive information that has to do with war and even the political interest of countries across the globe?
Well, I think Christelle just now made a very good point that any person reporting on something is still a human being with a certain set of beliefs and perception and everything else. But that's why we call it points of view. So it's important to have different points of view being presented in the media to have a balanced understanding of what's happening. And of course, people in Donbass have seen their side of the story. If you ask people from the bordering, let's say, regions or the eastern part of Ukraine and its current factual borders, you will see some other kind of a story. But what is important to provide is a balanced approach to maybe the very same facts, and to see the different stories, the stories of the actor and the stories of the one that are directly impacted by those actions. So this is one of the most important tasks, to be able to show the different voices, the different points of view. And of course, when you get to a war zone, it's hard to avoid being emotional, especially when you're in and out, when you don't live there for a long period of time. Of course, people get used to everything, and at some point they get a more cynical perception of even such things as you know, shelling and deaths and everything else. You use humor to protect yourself from the drama and trauma that you're surrounded with. You take many things in a very different way, because you know how sudden death can be, that life is not guaranteed for tomorrow. So the values change and a lot of things change. Of course, all of those points are to be taken into consideration. But people making decisions on whether to supply weapons or not, people who vote for that with, you know, their taxpayer dollar, people who, you know, sit on their couches and drink their drinks and eat their food discussing the news, should be able to get information that would add to their perception, add to their vision of the situation, before they say, oh yes, you know, let's send more money to Ukraine, or I support Ukraine, I stand with Ukraine, and whatsoever else. They need to really understand what they're standing for, and what that implies, and what the increasing weapon supply implies in the context of this very conflict. Because there could have been a peace deal 2-3 months after it started. There could have been a peace deal, but now to reach probably the very same thing, we all need to go through millions of people being traumatized, and hundreds of thousands being killed, and more millions being displaced, and you know, having to start their lives over, having nothing, being disconnected from their, you know, homes and families and friends, and all of those things will have effects over generations and generations to come. You do not just erase this once you sign a peace deal. You do not ensure reconciliation. You do not guarantee people actually forgiving each other for what they have done to each other. So the consequences will last for generations ahead. And many of those could have been avoided if not the foreign interference. So during the BRICS summit, when Antonio Guterres was making a point about, the world being one big family, I think it was a valuable comment made by Vladimir Putin that even in families, sometimes you have arguments and fights, right? But you need to be able to deal with it, to deal with the problem where it happened. So external influence here might be just making the situation much worse, and it would have been much easier to come to a peace deal shortly after it started, before millions and millions of people were dragged into this bloody mess.
Absolutely, humanity is suffering, and we are looking at the prospects for peace and the role that the media can play in ensuring this peace. Coming to you, Christelle, now that we have an alternative source of information coming particularly from the private media, what prospect do we, or maybe do you think this will have a long way to go in trying to convince those that need to take the decisions? Here we're not only looking at Russia and Ukraine coming to the negotiation table, we're also looking at the third parties, particularly nations which are aligned to the Kyiv government, in having that constructive and strategic peace talks or discussions that will lead us to the end of the crisis, and of course for peace to return.
I think it will still be a long process, but we begin to see, even in mainstream Western media, calls for negotiations, which was not the case something like 6 months or 1 year ago. Sure. So we see that the fact that there are alternative sources of news at some point is pushing the mainstream media to begin to tell the truth about what is happening. So we begin to see articles depicting the high corruption in Ukraine, depicting the bad state of the Ukrainian army, depicting the fact that Ukraine is not winning at all, but is losing war in a very bad way. So the fact that there is an alternative point of view is very important to force the mainstream media to get out of the narrative that they had built and to begin to speak the truth. And by speaking the truth, they will help pushing for negotiations. Because of course, the more there are people informed about what is happening, the more people will push to put an end to this war. We begin already to see in Western countries that a lot of people will say, we have to stop. We spent a lot of money. It's obvious now that Ukraine is not winning the war, that it will lose it. Yeah. So we are spending money and weapons for nothing. We have to stop that. And at some point, the Western governments will have to listen to that, because it can lead to social protests and internal problems. So at some point, they will have to stop this support, and so it will push Ukraine to negotiate. So I think the prospects for the moment for peace are still not for tomorrow. Let's see also what the influence will be of the new US president after the elections. I think also a lot will depend on that. If it's Kamala Harris, of course, we will continue for a huge support for Ukraine. If it's Donald Trump, let's see if we will apply the promises he made. But I think that it will still take a lot of time, and especially to break down all these delusional fakes, which has been spread by Ukraine, by Western propaganda, and which have pushed Ukraine into a deadlock. In this deadlock of we refuse to negotiate with Russia as far as the Russian soldiers are on our territory. But okay, it doesn't work like that, So I think the media here have a big role to play by speaking the truth. The more we speak the truth, the more we accelerate the launch of a negotiation process which can lead to a real peace treaty. And it's important to do that because now we see that Russia is progressing more quickly than ever during this year. even Western media are admitting, and even Ukrainian media are admitting that Russia is now progressing, and the Russian army is progressing at a pace which is the fastest in the beginning of 2024. And we see also the losses and the desertions in the Ukrainian army are now increasing at a fast pace. So the more Ukraine is waiting, the more the damages on a demographic and psychological point of view for his population and soldiers will be disastrous. So I really hope that at some point the elections in the US will change the situation. If it's Donald Trump and if he really applies what he promised, because if he decides to cut the help for Ukraine, then Ukraine will have to negotiate very quickly. Because as Josep Borrell said, if we stop financing Ukraine, the war will be over in 2 weeks.
Indeed, if we can stop, maybe countries can stop sending military support to Ukraine, it will be already a start point into solving the war. We just saw the devastation, of course, as a result of shelling, where areas are being shattered. And if, according to some pundit, we do not stop now, even the new phase of the region that the Russian Federation is bringing, particularly in Mariupol and elsewhere in the Donbass, then it will be another, bone of contention. And this brings us to understanding some realities, and particularly bringing the role of maybe the International Criminal Court with you, Yulia. We are aware that this legal body actually issued an arrest warrant to Russian President Vladimir Putin, and we look at the devastations in the Donbass. Interaction with residents in the Donbass or in the Donetsk People's Republic will tell you that they actually felt some relief when the Russian came in during the special military operation. And then we were looking at, the need for different opinions as far as the media is concerned. Now let's look at the decisions, or maybe the move, modus operandi, that the other organizations which actually have a role to play in solving the crisis, going about it, leaving one party, and of course extending an arrest warrant to Putin. We're looking at the economic sanctions on Putin, but then the recent BRICS summit actually underlined that Russia is not isolated, as has been the case on mainstream media. But that is not the underlying factor. At this juncture, with the realities on the ground, how can we push these multilateral institutional organizations that have a role to play in bringing about a peaceful resolution to the Ukraine crisis in today's, present world?
Well, it is supposed to be the UN and the UN Security Council dealing with this kind of issues. But we have seen that starting from the 90s, the UN Security Council is not as functional as it used to be and as it was supposed to be. Because, let's say, for example, Yugoslavia was bombed without any UN Security Council resolution supporting that. There have been many military operations that were started without the UN Security Council resolution on it. So it's not fulfilling its function, because when, let's say, the United States or NATO does what they think is important to do, nothing follows. There is no consequence of a relatively comparable force that could prevent them from doing that. And condemnation of the UN General Assembly also in practice means nothing. So those institutions, they just do not have implementation mechanisms. That's number one. And number two, at the moment, their decisions are not a rule for everyone. So there are exceptions at the international arena, and when NATO thinks that they can, go in and bomb a country, they can always do that. We see the conflict between Israel and Palestine that also is not really regulated by the international mediation institutions. As for the ICC, the funny fact is that the US does not support it itself, so it just uses it as an instrument. And there have been many cases where it became quite obvious that it's used as an instrument of of promoting own political agenda. The case of Laurent Gbagbo was very speaking in terms of that, because he was accused of genocide and many different things. But when the actual process was taking place, there was no evidence presented by witnesses, and it was actually funny to watch because the case just fell apart in the procedural part of it. But of course, the fact that Gbagbo was a war criminal and this and that and everything was widely covered by the media, but the failure of the ICC to prove its own allegations was not that much covered, right? So it went unnoticed, not to spoil the reputation of the institution. So if I'm not mistaken now, the ICC is working on some warrants against Mongolian actors that allowed Vladimir Putin to come in with the visit, which is also quite ridiculous. But this is how the ICC, for example, has discredited itself, also because the allegations on Vladimir Putin in terms of child trafficking are ridiculous. I mean, the children evacuated from the war zone and being taken to a better place doesn't look like a war crime. Absolutely. Right? And there was no clear evidence presented that the children were taken to, some place where they were tortured or something else, right? Yeah. So it's quite ridiculous to be talking about this kind of allegations and use them as a manipulation and blackmailing instrument against countries that are fulfilling their diplomatic tasks of, hosting events like BRICS Summit last year when it took place in South Africa. And South Africa couldn't guarantee security. I suppose it was one of the reasons why Vladimir Putin didn't travel there. But it's ridiculous to be putting countries, especially countries that are not strong enough to resist this kind of pressure, in between, to have them caught between the fires, right?
Absolutely.
So. Yes, the institutions that are out there and their statutes and everything else, it's all good and fine. The problem is that it's not functional. It's just not functional, and whatever is written on their core documents is not being implemented. Unfortunately, the very same thing can be said about the U.S. Constitution and many other documents that we believed were the founding principles of our modern day political system.
Okay, and of course, that should explain why there is a universal call for reforms of these multilateral institutions to see how we can decipher new ways of solving interconnected problems across the globe. Of course, we have just come to the end of the program, and I want to take this opportunity to extend gratitude to our guests today. Daniel KOVALIK, lawyer, human rights advocate, and also a peace advocate who joined from the United States of America. And we have KIVANÇ ÖZDAL, ULUSAL, KANAL Foreign News from Turkey, CHRISTELLE, NÉAT, Deputy Editor-in-Chief, international reporters, and of course YULIA BERG, political scientist, and the founder Globus Expert Club that brought, gave us highlight or insight on the role of the media and why it is imperative for journalists to remain objective, especially in the times of war. and try to give alternative information about the realities on the ground. I want to thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for always trusting the Pan-African Television for You media. We continue to bring you first-hand information. Just to note that for You media has been sending, journalists to the field to be able to appraise situations and, of course, make objective analysis or bring objective news that has been checked and cross-checked to ensure that they are more professional in the process of news giving, particularly as the world is taking a different dimension with all the changes that are occurring along lines of power, and you can name the rest. And it is on this note that I'll draw the curtains into today's edition of Global Insight. But don't go away. Keep having a lovely moment and programs for You Media Africa. Bye-bye.